Hello and welcome to Lunchtime Politics on Channels Television. I'm Millicent Walker. On the news this hour, UK's judgment on the forfeiture of Nigeria's $9 billion assets to a private company generates tension as federal government vows to prosecute everyone linked to the contract. Payback time for beneficiaries of federal government's 614 billion naira bailout. Plus time to roll up the sleeves for the president's cabinet as more ministers resume work. Welcome everyone to the program. We kick off this afternoon with what appears to be last week's UK court judgment, which ordered the forfeiture of Nigeria's $9 billion assets to a private company. The federal government has announced that it would prosecute everyone linked with the contract that resulted in that judgment. The Minister of Justice and Attorney General of the Federation, Mr. Abubakar Malami, is questioning the sincerity of those behind the contract awarded in 2010 and says the contract formed part of the inglorious legacies of past administrations which this government is being made to grapple with.
And concerted efforts of the current administration to combat corruption and rent-seeking in all its forms, Nigerians woke up unfortunately on Friday, 16th August 2019 to the rudest consequences of the underhand dealings of the first administration that has resulted in the award of $9 billion judgment against the Federal Republic of Nigeria by a British court, which ruled that Process and Industrial Development Limited had the right to seize 9 billion naira in Nigerian assets. It may interest you to know that the dispute that led to the arbitration between the federal government and P&ID, which consequently resulted in the said court ruling, arose from a 20-year gas supply processing agreement purportedly entered with P&ID by the first administration in 2010, which contract P&ID never performed as agreed. That being said, it must be placed on record that the federal government strongly views with serious concerns the underhand manners by which the negotiation, signing, and formation of the contract was carried out by some vested interest in the first administration in connivance with their local and international conspirators, all in the bid to inflict grave economic adversity on the Federal Republic of Nigeria and the good people of Nigeria. As a government that has the mandate of the people and their interests at heart, we shall not fold our arms and allow this injustice to go unpunished, as all efforts, actions, and steps shall be taken to bring to book all private individuals, corporate entities, and government officials, home and abroad, past and present, that played direct and indirect roles in the conception, negotiation, signing, formation, as well as prosecution of the purported agreement.
But a bit of a background to the story is that the court judgment is a fallout of a case which started in 2010 when an agreement to build a gas processing plant in Calabar, Cross River State, collapsed between the federal government and an Irish firm, Process and Industrial Development Limited, P&ID. The 20-year agreement would see the firm build a state-of-the-art gas processing plant to refine natural gas, which Nigeria was to receive free of charge to power its national electric grid. And the company intended to sell the byproduct from the process on the global market for profits in billions of dollars. Well, that is an issue we'll be taking a closer look at. But first, the federal government has opened up on what is perhaps not entirely good news for some state governments who benefited from the 614 billion naira budget support loan from the central bank. The beneficiaries of that facility may have to start preparing for payback, as the federal government is already holding talks to finalize modalities for its repayment. The Minister of Finance, Zainab Ahmed, told State House correspondents after the National Executive Council meeting that the Council has agreed to constitute a team of the Nigerian Governors Forum, the Ministry of Finance and the Central Bank within a week to conclude the process.
As at today, the budget facility that has been advanced by the federal government to the states is in the total sum of 614 billion naira. And this is to 35 states. This means an equivalent of 175 billion naira per state. Council agreed to constitute a team of the Nigerian Governors Forum, Ministry of Finance and the Central Bank to finalize modalities to commence repayments of this facility to the Central Bank. This judgment of $9 billion to P&ID gave me a lot of cause for concern. And even while we were not yet invited, we had been rallying around and trying to find out what needs to be done. The Attorney General and the Minister of Justice has assured us that they have already set in motion a process to appeal that judgment, and that from his assessment we have very good grounds to win the appeal.
So still trying to make sense of the over 600 billion naira bailout recovery bid from state governments, and also a decision that perhaps represents the largest financial liability in Nigeria's history, the $9 billion assets. We're now being joined by legal practitioners, Sanusi Musa, also the National Coordinator of Nigeria Consolidation Ambassadors Network, and another legal practitioner, Ofonime Eno. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining us on the program.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
If I might begin with Mr. Musa, the federal government's plans to recovering the 600 billion naira loan to improve the credit rating. Do you see the federal government achieving this with what all of the states, a few of the states, have to grapple with paying the minimum wage, for example?
But I think the states were aware right from the beginning that what was given to them was not a handout, but a bailout. And it was not just for them to go and spend. So what was expected of them at that time, because it was hard time, and the federal government as a responsible government, responsive government, must do something in order to pull the state from becoming failure, because, you know, at that time, it was impossible for them to even pay salaries. But over the years, what is expected is that various governments of the state must have done something to now improve the IGR of the state. Also, that with the improved revenue from the federation account, they must be able to have a plan of how to repay back the money. More particularly, that the federal government also, it's not that it doesn't need that money. Concerning the fact that most of the time we normally have a budget deficit, but it has to do that in order to save the state from the collapse, which will have a spiral effect on other sectors of the economy. So I think it's, and it's not something that the federal government say it will lose its might to just take up the money. A committee has been set up between the NGF and the federal government, which will work out modalities for the repayment in such a way that it will not affect the governance of the state, while the government will get its money back. I think there is no cause for alarm.
Mr. Eno, beside you, do you share the views of Mr. Musa? Do you see any legal implications in any way, perhaps a backlash with their achieving the bailout?
No, I don't foresee any legal backlash. What I see here is that the federal government, acting on its mandate to always improve the macro economy, bailed out the states through the stabilization fund to ensure that states could primarily use these monies to pay salaries and also to fund budget deficits. If we remember very well, these funds were released at the time Nigeria was experiencing economic depression. And to that extent, the federal government came in and offered this buffer to states to ensure that these states would be able to stabilize its budget, fund its budget, and pay for pay workers' salaries. Now, over time, these monies has materialized, and I believe that state governments should know that once you have put in place a documentation that allows you to access these funds through the CBN, there's also a payment mechanism that has been set down in place. So I'm sure that the attorneys generals of the states, the governors of these states were aware that at one point in time, payment of these loans will be asked. And so a state being an entity on its own under our constitution are allowed to enter into this kind of agreements with the federal government and even with international donor agencies. So I don't see any legal backlash arising from the attempts by the federal government to get back these monies, because these monies are to be invested and kept in the central bank for further
Let's move on to another issue,
purposes,
which is also very worrying. And Mr. Eno, just before we go to Mr. Musa, Mr. Eno, the $9 billion Nigerian assets forfeited by the United Kingdom. Now, the Attorney General of the Federation and the Minister of Justice said that they have plans to appeal the judgment. Do you think we have good plans to appeal this arbitration award?
Well, I think that issue has to do with how the federal government managed that arbitration ab initio. The federal government is well within its rights to appeal that arbitrary award, and from the facts of the case, they have a good case. But I believe that the federal government should also reach out to the company PD&I to negotiate out-of-court settlement, as was the case before this award was given. Remembering the fact that before the advent of this government, there were attempts by the former administration to negotiate and bid down the amounts owed to this company. And also, looking back at the facts of this matter, it was an issue that had to do with a project that is still not in existence. So either way, the federal government of Nigeria stood to benefit a lot if this project had taken off. But since it had not, and the company is seeking for a redress following the breach of contract by the federal government, I think the federal government should appeal this matter, but most importantly, reach out and see whether they could follow up the out-of-court settlement that was begun prior to this administration.
Mr. Musa, do you also share his view? And your immediate response to the Attorney General of the Federation saying that they will be bringing to book private individuals, corporate entities, government officials, past and present, who had anything to do with this?
No, I think we must commend the Attorney General, the Honorable Attorney General of the Federation, for taking that step. Because from when you look at it from any angle, you see that there was an attempt. I mean, truly, you cannot rule out a connivance between some government officials who think that they can use such companies to siphon Nigerians' fund. Because this was a company that never had experience in executing any job like that. It was specifically formed in order to execute that gas project in Nigeria. Then going into a contract with it in such a way that the question is that were there due diligence? And like the Attorney General insinuated, it's like the Ministry of Justice was totally sidelined in signing that contract. And these are issues that involve so many things. Even the land to do the job was said to be, procured from Cross River State Government. One must expect that before signing the contract, the official make sure that the land is available and all other things are in place for the contract to take off. But those were not. Why? Because the whole intendment from the way it looks was never to execute the contract, but it was intended for it to fail so that this new company that was just specifically formed in order to sign this contract can go and now claim damages against the federal government and take Nigeria's money and give it to some few individuals.
Right.
And it is very important that apart from the appeal process that the federal government will take, it has to make sure that, public officials those that are in the government now and those that have gone, who have had hand in how this thing was done, are brought to book, so
Okay.
that
We'll
it will
come
serve
back.
as a
We need
deterrent
to take
to
a break
others,
at this
because,
time. Gentlemen, we'll come back to concluding on this discussion and also bring to you, when we return, the Social Democratic Party. They've appointed a new chairman. Join us for more when we return. Welcome back. But first to the news in brief. We begin with the controversy trailing the partial closure of borders in 4 geopolitical zones of the country. Well, it's raging as Nigerians frown at the federal government's decision. The operation codenamed X-Swift Response is the combination of officers from the Nigerian Customs Service, Immigration Service, the police, as well as the Nigerian Armed Forces carrying out special stop and search operations at the borders. Staying with security in Sokoto State, a member representing Denge Shuni State constituency at the Sokoto State House of Assembly, Aminu Budai, was abducted yesterday. A close relation to the victim says his brother was kidnapped by yet to be identified persons. When contacted, the public relations officer of the State Police Command, Abubakar Sadiq, confirmed that the legislator was kidnapped and efforts are ongoing to rescue him. Well, let's get back to our discussions, and we have been talking about the $9 billion assets, which is a financial liability Nigeria has been asked to pay by the United Kingdom. Our guests have been and still are legal practitioners, Sanusi Musa and also Ofonime Eno. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for your patience. Let me direct this question to you, Mr. Eno. In terms of the appeal, what the Federation's Attorney General Minister for Justice has said, do you think that we have the capacity to prosecute those people who were involved with this? Did we need to wait for, the UK court to come out with this judgment?
Absolutely. It is well within the powers of the Attorney General to investigate and also prosecute anyone found culpable of this contract. Now, first of all, looking back at the facts of the case, personally, I believe that that contract shouldn't have been signed with the federal government, but with the NNPC or NAPIMS, because the NNPC is the arm of God, is the company, the federal company that the Federation of Nigeria uses to contract oil and gas and other oil-related commercial transactions. Now, that contract that was signed in 2010 for a pipeline project that was supposed to be located at Odupani in Cross River State was signed by the federal government of Nigeria. And to this extent, there's some discrepancies here. So I believe that the federal is well within the powers of the Attorney General, being the chief law officer of the Federation, to investigate what happened and then also prosecute culpable individuals. Now, we didn't have to wait until an arbitral court in the UK slammed Nigeria with such a huge judgment, thereby attaching it to our assets located outside the country. We should have, from day one, looked at the contents of the arbitral award, followed it to the letter, and while doing that, investigate and identify the individuals who had got themselves involved in this deal from day one.
All right.
So what the Attorney General right now is doing is to go back and open the books and investigate those who were culpable and bring them to book. It is well within his powers, but at the same time, most importantly, the federal government would need to pursue this appeal because Nigeria stands to lose a huge amount of money and assets.
Yeah, roughly 2.5% of Nigeria's
by
GDP.
the company to recover this money.
Let's quickly get Mr. Musa's thoughts, and this is the relationship of the relationship of the country, for example, when it has to do with agreements. Mr. Musa, what are your thoughts with regards to how Nigeria handles contracts and agreements with, other countries, and how important we need to take some of these agreements?
I think all these kind of things take us back to the main issue why the present government was voted into power in 2015 as well as re-elected in 2019. The issue of corruption that has become endemic in our country, because one is expected that signing of contract must involve the office of the Honorable Attorney General. It is the Attorney General of the Federation that has the responsibility, the sole responsibility to vet all the contracts and see whether they confirm they have, they are within the legal terms that will be, will not, it doesn't have any legal implication against the country. But I think over the years, because of the corruption that was endemic, that has not been followed. Some agencies, because of their closeness maybe to the president or other people that are powerful, they went formed companies just like this issue of PNID, which never had any experience in executing such kind of job before, was formed in order to siphon Nigerian money through the intention for the contract to fail. Maybe that was the reason why the office of the Honorable Attorney General was not involved. And these are issues that really the federal government has to take them very serious. Government officials must be made to realize that they cannot continue to act in arbitrary manner and get away with it, right, while causing the government, the people of Nigeria, to lose a lot of money in terms of judgment debt. And this is one of the situations. Because it's quite alarming. It's painful when you even think of it, that
Gentlemen,
a new company that was formed just signed an agreement with Nigeria without doing anything. Now it has been made, was given an award of about $6.something billion, which has now reached about 9
We will continue to see how this pans out, but we'd like to appreciate your time at this point, and that's legal practitioner Sunusi Musa and also Fonome Eno. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining us on the program. Well, days after the inauguration of the president's new cabinet and the newly appointed ministers, they're resuming their duty posts at their various ministries. And some of the returning ministers spoke to our correspondent, identifying challenges they faced during their past tenure, controversies they had to deal with, and plans ahead. Well, the National Executive Committee of the Social Democratic Party, SDP, has confirmed Professor Tunde Adeniran, a former Minister of Education and former ambassador to Germany, as the national chairman of the party. Professor Adeniran was confirmed at the National Executive meeting in Abuja, having served as the acting national chairman of the party since the former party leader, Chief Olufalaye, stepped down. Although he was earlier suspended for misconduct and anti-party activities, Professor Adeniran assures delegates and national officers of his commitment to actualizing the political aspirations of patriotic Nigerians dedicated to national service.
As key stakeholders, we must all be mindful that we owe it to ourselves and the nation to make the SDP bounce back very strongly, and for it to occupy a very respectable position in our polity and the quest for sustainable development. I assure you all that my leadership will be committed to repositioning the party as a veritable vehicle for the actualization of political aspirations of patriotic and people-oriented Nigerians dedicated to national service. It will be underpinned by a culture of discipline, party supremacy, rule of law, integrity, accountability, effectiveness, efficiency, broad-based participation, and consensus-based.
Well, that's it on the program. Thank you for watching. Don't forget you can join the conversation on our social media platforms as we continue to talk about issues that affect you and I. I'm Millicent Nwonka. I'll see you soon.